Imagine for a second that you're standing in an electronics store in 1989. You're surrounded by the future: Sony Walkmans, Toshiba laptops, Panasonic VCRs, Nintendo Game Boys. The shelves are glowing with Japanese innovation. Everyone knows that Japan is going to own the 21st century. American executives are reading books about Kaizen and quality circles, terrified that Tokyo is going to eat their lunch. Now, fast forward to 2025. You walk into that same electronics store. What do you see? Samsung phones from Korea, LG TVS from Korea, iPhones designed in California, made in China. And Japan? Japan is selling you the same digital camera they've been refining for 20 years, while the world moved on to smartphones. Welcome to the most spectacular collapse of industrial dominance in modern history. Japan didn't get invaded. They didn't have a revolution. They simply got stuck, frozen in time. While the rest of the world sprinted into the digital age, Japan's tech giants turned into museums. Beautiful, well-engineered museums, but museums nonetheless. Today, we're going to dissect how a country that invented the transistor radio, the VCR, and the PlayStation managed to completely miss the smartphone revolution, the cloud computing boom, and the AI explosion. We're going to look at the lifetime employment system that killed innovation, the zombie companies that refused to die, and the brutal reality of what happens when a nation chooses social harmony over creative destruction. Buckle up. This is going to be a masterclass in how to squander a generation of genius. 1. The lifetime employment trap. When nobody can leave, nobody can innovate. Let's start with a story. Imagine you're a brilliant 25-year-old engineer at Sony in 1995. You have an idea, a crazy idea. What if we put a music player, a camera, and a phone into one device? You pitch it to your manager. He's 55 years old. He's been at Sony for 30 years. Your idea threatens the entire corporate structure. If we make a device that combines a camera, a music player, and a phone, what happens to the camera division? What happens to the Walkman division? Your manager smiles politely. He says, "That's very interesting. Let me discuss this with the committee." 3 months later, your idea is dead. You are quietly transferred to work on incremental improvements to portable CD players. This is the lifetime employment trap. And it's the original sin of Japan's tech stagnation. Japan's labor market operates on shushin koyo, lifetime employment. You give the company your entire life. In return, the company promises you a job until you're 65. This system was perfect for manufacturing in the 1960s and 70s. When you're making steel and televisions, you don't need disruption. You need incremental improvement. But when the world shifted from hardware to software, from products to platforms, this system became a suicide pact. Why? Because innovation requires failure. Innovation requires risk. And you cannot do that when your entire corporate structure is designed to protect the jobs of 50-year-old middle managers who have spent their lives perfecting the VCR. Let's look at the numbers. Labor mobility in Japan hovers around 4 to 5%. In the United States, it's 15 to 20%. In Silicon Valley, it's probably 30%. In the US, if Google says no to your idea, you quit, raise venture capital, and build it yourself. That's how Instagram was born. That's how WhatsApp was born. In Japan, if Sony says no, you stay at Sony. Because quitting is social suicide. Because changing jobs is seen as disloyalty. This is why Sony invented the digital music player, but Apple invented the iPod. This is why Sharp invented the touchscreen smartphone in 2004, but Apple invented the iPhone. The technology was in Japan. The execution was suffocated by structure. 2. The zombie companies, banks that refuse to let anything die. Let's rewind to 1991. The Japanese asset bubble just popped. Banks are sitting on trillions of yen in bad loans. Companies can't pay back their debts. In a normal capitalist system, what happens? Bankruptcy. The bad companies die. Capital is reallocated to new ventures. This is creative destruction, the engine of economic growth. Japan said, no, we're not doing that. Instead, the government and banks decided on forbearance. Banks didn't foreclose. They evergreened the loans. They would loan the company just enough to pay the interest. The company didn't have to restructure. They just had to keep existing. This created zombie companies. Companies that are technically alive but economically dead. No profits, no growth. They just shamble along, consuming resources and blocking new entrants. By the early 2000s, roughly 15 to 20% of Japanese companies were zombies. They couldn't cover their interest payments with operating profits. They only survived because banks refused to pull the plug. Here's the devastating consequence. If you're a young, innovative company trying to compete, you're not on a level playing field. You're competing against zombies being kept alive by cheap loans. Sharp should have died in the 1990s. They missed the LCD revolution. They missed smartphones. But they shambled along for 25 years until Foxconn bought them in 2016. That's a quarter century of wasted time. Compare this to the US after 2008. They let Lehman Brothers die. They let Bear Stearns die. It was painful, but by 2012, the economy was growing. Uber, Airbnb, and Tesla rose from the ashes. Japan never ripped the Band-Aid off. They kept the patient on morphine for 30 years. And now the patient can't remember how to walk. 3. The conglomerate curse. When everything is connected, nothing can change. What does Hitachi make? Trains, nuclear reactors, construction equipment, elevators, air conditioners, medical devices. Hitachi is not a company, it is a country. It has over 350,000 employees operating in dozens of unrelated industries. This is the conglomerate curse. In the West, companies focus on core competencies. Apple makes consumer electronics and software. Google makes software and advertising. There's logic. In Japan, major tech companies are sprawling hydra-headed monsters that grew through decades of acquisitions and keiretsu relationships. A keiretsu is a network of interlinked companies that own shares in each other and protect each other. When you're a conglomerate, every decision becomes political negotiation. The semiconductor division wants R&D investment. The home appliance division is losing money and needs a bailout. The nuclear division needs cash to cover scandal losses. Who wins? Whoever has the most political power, usually the oldest, most conservative division. This is why Toshiba, once a pioneer in NAND flash memory, sold that division in 2018 to cover nuclear business losses. They sold the future to pay for the past. Compared to Samsung, Samsung is also a conglomerate, but the Lee family controls it with an iron fist. When they decided Samsung would dominate memory chips and smartphones, that's what happened. No committees, no consensus. Japan has consensus culture. Decision-making by exhaustion. By the time a Japanese conglomerate decides to pivot, the market has been captured by Korean, American, or Chinese competitors. 4. The Galapagos syndrome. When your home market becomes a prison. There's a term in Japanese business, Galapagoska, products so hyper-optimized for Japan that they're irrelevant everywhere else. In the early 2000s, Japan had the most advanced mobile phones in the world. Japanese flip phones had mobile internet, emoji, mobile payments, TV tuners, and GPS, features that wouldn't appear in Western phones for a decade. But these phones only worked in Japan. Different network standard, designed for Japanese language. Exclusive carrier deals, perfect for Japan, useless for the world. When the iPhone launched in 2007, Japanese consumers laughed. That thing doesn't even have a TV tuner. Why would we want that? And they were right. For 18 months, the iPhone was inferior to Japanese phones. But Apple wasn't optimizing for Japan. They were building a platform for the world. Within 3 years, the global market moved on, and Japan was stuck with flip phones nobody wanted. Japan's domestic market is 100 to 25 million wealthy, sophisticated people loyal to domestic brands. For decades, Japanese companies could profit just serving Japan. This created a comfort zone, a prison of complacency. Korean companies like Samsung couldn't survive on 51 million people. If Samsung wanted to grow, they had to conquer America, Europe, China. They had no choice. This forced global thinking from day one. Chinese companies had the same pressure. Huawei, Xiaomi, they couldn't just sell in Beijing. They had to go global. They became lean, aggressive, and adaptable. Japanese companies became fat, slow, and complacent. They optimized for a market that stopped growing in 1995. And by the time they realized the world had moved on, it was too late. 5. The China shock. When your manufacturing partner becomes your destroyer. In the 1990s and 2000s, Japanese companies made a calculated decision. Labor costs in Japan were too high, so they moved production to China. Panasonic, Sony, Sharp, Toshiba, they all built factories in China. The deal was simple. We bring the technology and expertise, you provide cheap labor, we make products in China and sell to the world. It worked for a while, but then the Chinese workers learned, the Chinese engineers learned, and they stopped being subcontractors. They became competitors. Huawei started as a telecom equipment reseller. Now they make smartphones better than Sony's. Xiaomi started as a software company. Now they make everything. BYD started as a battery company. Now they're the world's largest EV manufacturer. Japan taught China how to manufacture high-quality electronics. And then China ate Japan's lunch. Here's the brutal reality. China has 1.4 billion people. Economies of scale Japan can only dream of. When Xiaomi launches a phone, they sell 10 million units in China alone in the first month. That cash flow lets them undercut Japanese competitors on price while maintaining quality. Japanese companies can't compete on price, can't compete on scale, and increasingly can't compete on quality. Chinese companies closed the gap. Worse, China didn't just steal manufacturing, they stole the supply chain. All the component manufacturers, screens, chips, batteries, they're in China now. If you're building a phone, you buy components from Chinese suppliers. You're funding your own competition. Japan used to be the hub of the Asian electronics supply chain. Now they're a spoke, a small, increasingly irrelevant spoke. 6. The demographic death spiral. When your engineers are retiring and nobody replaces them. Japan's population peaked in 2008 at 128 million. Today, it's 125 million. By 2050, projected at 105 million. By 2100, below 75 million. But it's not just the total, it's the age structure. Nearly 30% of Japanese people are over 65. The median age is 49. Your senior engineers, the people with all the institutional knowledge, are retiring, and there's nobody to replace them. The young people who would become engineers are a tiny cohort. Birth rate has been below replacement since the 1970s. And the ones who are born? Many don't want to be engineers. They watch their fathers sacrifice their lives to these companies for nothing but a gold watch and a pension that might not exist. Japan's tech companies face a talent crisis with no solution. Can't hire foreigners because immigration is restrictive. Can't poach from competitors because of lifetime employment culture. Can't attract young talent because salaries are lower and work culture is miserable. So they keep old guys working into their 70s. You have 68-year-old engineers trying to understand TikTok. Meanwhile, in Shenzhen, the average age at Huawei or Tencent is probably 28. They grew up with the internet. They're hungry. Japan's tech giants are being run by men who started in the 1980s, trying to compete in a world they don't understand with a workforce that's literally dying. So where are we now? Sony makes great cameras and PlayStations, but they're a niche player. Panasonic sold off consumer electronics, pivoting to batteries. Toshiba is being broken up and sold for parts. Sharp is owned by Foxconn. Hitachi is exiting consumer markets. The Japanese tech giants are no longer giants. They're museums with glorious histories and beautiful engineering. But they missed the future. The global tech industry is now American and Chinese companies. Apple, Google, Amazon, Huawei, Xiaomi, Tencent. Korea's Samsung holds its own. Japan has been left behind, not because they lack talent or capital, but because their systems, cultural, corporate, and financial, are fundamentally incompatible with the speed and ruthlessness required in 21st century tech. Here's the lesson. Japan chose to protect jobs, avoid disruption, and maintain harmony. And in doing so, they sacrificed growth, innovation, and the future. Stability is not the same as health. Sometimes you need to let the old die so the new can be born. Europe is making the same mistake right now. America is flirting with it. But Japan is the warning. If you protect everything, you kill everything. Japan invented the future once, but they got stuck in the productivity trap. And now they're watching from the sidelines as the world races ahead. Thanks for watching. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, have you owned a Japanese tech product you loved? And do you think Japan can innovate again, or is it too late? I'll see you in the next one.